Okay, so let's solve some problems from chapter 18. And a second reminder is that this is the final chapter before the midterms. And as I've said already, this is the most important chapter of this course. So it's important that you guys understand pretty much everything that I'm talking about. So hopefully you guys do. And if you do, it'll be fairly easy for you to understand the problems that I'm going to solve right now. So as always, I'm going to ask you guys to solve question 1 from the book on your own. In addition, try to solve number 8 as well. It's quite interesting. Not only is it an interesting problem to solve, but it also helps you understand the theories that we have been solving and taking a look into in this chapter. I will be solving number 17. Okay, so let's get started. We have this 4 equations given. So C equals to C naught plus C1 y minus t. Remember, we've seen this equation for the first time in chapter 3 of Eco 207, and it's back again for Eco 209. Next, we have I equals to d naught plus d1y. M, which is import, equals to m1y, and x equal to x1 y star. Y star is, of course, the income of a foreign country. Now, here's something I'm going to ask you guys to do. Okay, it's not part of the question, but regardless, you all should be able to do it. Is from our understanding of the goods market from 207, you all know what C0 and C1 are, right? C0 is the autonomous consumption, and C1 is the MPC. What I'm going to ask you guys to do is figure out what D0, D1, M1, and X1 are. Okay, I'm not going into it myself because you guys should be able to do it on your own. But so anyway, so we have these 4 equations, and part A requires us to find the equilibrium y. Okay, so what's the equilibrium condition? Y equals to z, and we know that z is equal to c plus I plus g minus m plus x. So now we just plug in the values, and we will get y equal to C0 C1 y minus t plus D0 plus D1y plus g plus M1y, minus M1y plus X1 y star. And now you guys know how to solve this problem, right? We've done quite a lot of similar problems in Eco 207. So I'm not going through all the steps. Once again, you guys should be able to do it. Once we've simplified all of this, what we get is 1 minus C1 minus D1 plus M1 times Y, which is equal to C0 minus C1t plus D0 plus G plus X1 Y star, right? And then, of course, if we simplify this a little bit more, we are going to get Y equal to 1 divided by 1 minus C1 minus D1 plus M. This effectively is the multiplier. Multiply this with C0 minus C1t plus D0 plus G plus X1 Y star. Right? So, okay, so how is this different from what we have already done in Eco 207 when we looked at the goods market? A few things are different. Of course, we had not talked about, we had not introduced openness back then, so we didn't have import and export figures. But otherwise, you see, it's pretty much what we already know. If you take out these two, if you take out this and this, then what we have is exactly the equilibrium, goods market equilibrium from chapter 3, or maybe it was chapter 5, whichever one. It's just a few difference because, of course, we are dealing with an open economy now. So this is the answer for part A. Let's move on to part B now. Suppose the government purchase increases by 1 unit. So what's happening is G is going up by 1 unit. Okay. If G goes up, what's the effect on output? Okay, that's fairly straightforward. What is happening is that G is going up by 1 unit. If that happens, what will happen to Y? Once again, this we have already done in Eco 207, so I shouldn't have to explain too much. If G goes up by 1 unit, Y, as a result, Y will increase by how much? By the multiplier amount, right? So by 1 divided by 1 minus C1 minus D1 plus M1 by this much. And that's really it. So yeah, G increased by 1 unit. As a result, Y increased by this amount right here. Now, one thing important, the question specifies this relationship. Let me write this down in red. 0 less than M1 less than C1 plus D1 less than 1. Okay. Now this is mentioned in the question, and this is very important. Without this relationship, we would not be able to solve this problem. Okay. Or at least, yeah, we will be able to solve this problem, but we would not be absolutely certain that the answer that we have, which is this, we would not be certain that the answer would make any sense, make any economic sense. The question does not ask you to answer this, but what I want you all to try and answer in your own time is, why is this relationship important? Or rather, you may try to answer, what would be the problem if this relationship did not hold? Okay, because remember what I've said at the very beginning of this semester is that Eco 209, this is your third macro theory course. We are going to get a bit technical. We can no longer avoid this technical aspects of various theories that we are going to look into. In Eco 102 or 207, we may not have spent a lot of time on something like this, but it's important in 209 that you all understand the importance of this identity or this relationship. So spend some time trying to figure that out, okay? But anyways, for part B, the answer is right here. If G increased by 1 unit, Y will increase by this relationship. Let's move on to part C. How do net export change when government purchases increase by 1 unit? Okay, let's write down net export first. Net export is equal to export minus import, right? And what were the expressions for export and import that we have already seen? Let's come up. These two. So we have x1 y star minus m1 y. This is x. Now the question is, what will be the change in nx if there is a change in g? So what we have seen in part B is that when g changes, there is going to be a change in y, right? Is any of this changing? X1 will not change, y star will not change. That's good. M1 will not change, but what we do know is that y will change. And by how much will y change? Well, by this much. That was the answer to part B. So the change in nx, if g changes by 1 unit, will be, these are not changing. So let's just write down 0 minus m1 times 1 divided by 1 minus c1 minus d1 plus m1. Or we can simplify the relationship a little bit more. Change in nx will be equal to minus m1 divided by 1 minus c1 minus d1 plus m1. Okay, and I think that's all that part C wanted. How do net export change when government purchase? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so two things to notice here. Okay, first of all, we have a minus here. A minus, what does that signify? That signifies that if g is increasing, y is going to increase. If y is increasing, m is going to increase. And if m increase, nx is going to fall, right? We've talked about this already. So that's what this negative sign is signifying, that if g increase, the result will be that nx will fall. That's the first observation to take away from this. The second thing that you need to, once again, the question does not ask you guys to do this, but I'm going to ask you all to do this once again in your own time, is try to solve this graphically, okay? Not find the exact figure, but try to figure out, let me write this down. What happens to net export of a country when G changes, or if I were to get a bit more technical, when there is G increasing would be an expansionary fiscal policy. So suppose I ask you guys this question during your midterm. What happens to the net export of a country if the country imposes an expansionary fiscal policy? And I say use diagram or draw a diagram to answer your question. So give it a go. Effectively, that's part C. Okay, the part C that we have solved, it shows us that when G goes up, there is a transition, of course. First Y go up, then M go up, then NX falls. It's possible to show this graphically, and I have actually shown it graphically during the videos that you guys would have already gone through. So try to solve this in your own time, and of course, if you have a problem, feel free to come to me, but I think you should all be able to solve it. Okay, after part C, there are a few extra bits of information given. Now we're looking at two economies. Okay, we're looking at two economies. What we know about these two economies is that one has an M1 of 0.5 and the other has an M1 of 0.1. So once again, remember when I told you guys to all the way up here to try and figure out what M1 was? I hope you have been able to do that, because without that, this question isn't going to make a whole lot of sense. It's just going to look like maths. Okay, just moving numbers around. But if you understand what M1 is, conceptually, theoretically, you will understand the models that we've looked into a bit more. Okay, and what else do we have? We know that for both countries, C1 plus D1 is equal to 0.6. So once again, I hope you guys have been able to figure out what C1 and D1 are, because if you have, then this problem will make a bit more sense. D, okay. So suppose one of the economies is much larger than the other. Okay, that makes sense. Suppose we're thinking of India and Bangladesh, and the economy of India is, of course, much larger than the economy of Bangladesh. So the question is, which economy do you expect to have a larger value of M1? See, right here. Now we need to answer this question, we need to know what is M1. What is M1? Okay, so let's go up here. Let's bring this equation down actually. Okay, so what we have is import is equal to M1 times Y. Now the values of M1 you see 0.5, 0.1 fractions, okay, less than 1. What M1 is, I hope you've been able to figure it out on your own. If not, I'm writing it down. Not M1 is the propensity to import. Remember, C1 was the marginal propensity to consume. This is effectively marginal propensity to import. So if we have an M1 of 0.5, what that means is that if our income goes up by 1, our import will go up by 0.5. If our income goes up by 10, import will go up by 5. That's what M1 is telling us. The marginal propensity that we have, or that this country has, to import. Okay. Now, so the question in D is, which economy do you expect to have a larger value of M1? Effectively, which economy, the larger or the smaller economy, will have a higher propensity to import? Okay, so the answer to this, once again, before you look at what my answer is, it would be good if you pause the video and try to figure it out on your own. Okay, I'm going to give you the answer, of course, but spend a few minutes, see if you can figure out. Think of India and Bangladesh and try to figure out that which country will have a higher propensity to import. Yep. So the answer is that the larger country will lower M1. So the question is why? And that's because larger countries, now first of all, this is not a mathematical or a theoretical relationship. We cannot do that. What we can say is what we tend to observe in real life, what we tend to observe in the data or in practice, is that larger countries will have lower propensity to import because larger countries tend to produce a larger variety of goods. So their need to import is lower. Okay, but for smaller countries, we have a, if we're talking about Bangladesh, we have a pretty strong need to import certain goods that we can't produce in our country. So India, for example, can produce a lot of different goods. China can do it, USA can do it, because these are large economies. By contrast, if let's ignore Bangladesh. Even if we look at Europe, for example, let's think of Netherlands. Netherlands is a highly developed country, but it's a relatively small country. As a result, Netherlands' propensity to import will be much higher than the propensity of someone, let's say, like Germany, which is a much larger economy, and they produce a much wider variety of goods. And as a result, they will have a lower propensity to import. As I've said, this is what we observe in practice. This is not a mathematical relationship, but the explanation does hold. It does make sense that the larger you are, the lower your propensity to import will be. So anyways, that was part D. Let's move on to part E. In part E, we have to recalculate our answers to part B and C for each of the economies. Okay. So in part B, okay, before we do that, let's identify one thing. Since we've argued that larger country will have lower MI, we have these two MIs. So what we can say then, that the small country have the MI of 0.5 and the large country have the MI of 0.1, right? This is what we established in part D. Now let's take a look at part B again. This is what we had. So let's take it down. What we had found in part B was that if G increase by 1 unit, Y would also increase by this amount, 1 divided by 1 minus C1 minus D1 plus M1. Now we have to recalculate this with the fig values that we already have. Let me rewrite this. Might simplify it for you guys a little. 1 divided by 1 minus, I'm going to put this in bracket, C1 plus T1 plus M1. Okay. Now, let's start with the small country first. For the small country, what this will be is 1 divided by 1 minus. Remember, C1 plus D1 is 0.6 for both countries, and M1 for the small country is 0.5. As a result, what do we get? 0.9. 9 here. And for the large country, what we will have is 1 divided by 1 minus, this is 0.6 plus 0.1. So what we are going to get here is 0.5. So now what we can say is, oh no, wait, 1 divided by 0.9, sorry, however much we get, and 1 divided by 0.5 equals to however much we get. This is 2 and this is 1.1, I think, but if you guys have calculators, please check it out. Okay, so what we can say as a result is that when government expenditure goes up by 1 unit, or if I were to make it a bit more technical, whenever there is an expansionary fiscal policy implemented, which leads to government expenditure going up by 1 unit, the output in this small country will go up by 1.1 unit, and the output in this large country will go up by 2 units. Okay, that's the multiplier after all, right? The multiplier tells us that if there is a 1%, 1 unit change in the autonomous consumption components, by how much will output change, which will always be more than 1. So that's what we've established here. So this was recalculation of part B. Now let's do the recalculation of part C, which was, we found that change in NX due to this expansionary fiscal policy would be minus M1 divided by 1 minus C1 minus D1 plus M1. And we have to recalculate this as well for the large and the small country. So once again, let's start with the small country. So change in NX would be how much? Minus M1 is 0.5 here, and we know this is 0.9. So this is effectively, how much will this be? Minus 0.5, something like this, and we'll go on. this. And for the large country, what will be the change in NX? It will be minus 0.1 divided by 0.5, minus 0.2. Right? So what does that mean? That means that whenever there is a 1 unit change in government expenditure, we know that Y will go up. That's what we established here. But when government expenditure goes up, it's also going to reduce the net export of the small country by 0.55 and reduce the net export of the large country by 0.2. Okay, and that's the answer to part E. Of course, the maths is fairly simple. You can all do it. It's basic arithmetic, but do spend some time trying to figure out the theory behind it and what do these numbers actually mean. What are the implications of these numbers? That's what's important in Eco 209. Okay, let's try part F. In which economy will fiscal policy have a large effect on output and on net export? Okay, that's just fairly simple. Let me just write it down for you guys. Fiscal policy will have a larger effect on output in the, okay, let's figure this out. So when there was a fiscal policy, 1 unit change in G was going to change output by 1.1 in the small country, but by 2 in the large country. So output in the large country. Similarly, fiscal policy will have larger effect on part B is on net export in the which country? Okay, let's take a look at this. When there is a change in G of 1 unit, change in NX is 0.5 in the small country and 0.2 in the large country. So over here, the answer is in the small country. Okay, and that's the answer. So once again, I mean, we just have to take a look at these numbers and we know where the larger effect will be from. So giving the answer is easy. Okay, it's fairly straightforward. But you guys should spend some time trying to figure out, trying to think about exactly why will this happen? Why will fiscal policy have a stronger effect in the large country, in the output of the large country, and in the net export of the small country? Try to figure out the rationale behind it. That's really what you guys want to do as eco majors. And as you go on later on, try to tackle 300 and 400 level courses. Okay, so that's all that I'm going to do. Number 7, as I've said, you guys should try to do number 1 and number 8. And that should be enough preparation. Remember to read the book. And up next is the midterm, I suppose. So good luck to everyone for that.